What the hell is this?
Despite popular belief, adapting a piece of media into another medium is a rather difficult thing to do. It's not as simple as Control-C, Control-V. There's a lot of things to consider, like how well certain aspects of the original have aged, what works better in a visual medium, etc., etc. Anime in particular makes it seem so easy. Just adapt an already present visual medium into another visual medium. Just add motion, but even then, it's not always a perfect process. Video game adaptations in particular have always struggled during this process, understandably so, and it wasn't until the Sonic 3 movie where I felt as though we truly got a fantastic video game movie. But when it comes to video game adaptations that don't suck quite as much, it seems as though TV shows have been the better way to go about it. Rather than cram a multi-hour game into an hour-and-a-half movie, we can cram it into a few hours of a TV show, spread over multiple episodes. And even then...
Well,
it's had a rather flawed history.
And once again, it hasn't been until recent years where some actually good video game shows have been released, like The Witcher and Castlevania. And yeah, we've gotten a few stinkers here and there, but it seems as though quite a few people have caught on to the formula for good video game adaptations.
And in this world where we have the current scale from Sonic 3 to Borderlands, right smack dab in the middle, we have Netflix's Devil May Cry.
As someone at least somewhat new to the Devil May Cry series, when I heard that this show was coming out, I was immediately intrigued. Look, any show or movie that uses Last Resort unironically is at the very least worth checking out, even more so if they got Evanescence to release a new song and create a goddamn AMV out of it like it's the late 2000s.
What a time to be alive, where the mid to late 2000s edge can be seen as cool again.
In fact, I was so excited for this show, not only did I decide to do a reaction series of it, which you can see on my YouTube channel and Patreon page, link below, I actually bought Devil May Cry 3 on the Switch and began playing the game. So when April 3rd came around, I sat down on my couch, watched the show, and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
And if that were the end of this review, I wouldn't have made it in the first place. What kickstarted me into making this video was going online to look at the reviews for the show. And I don't think I've ever seen a more mixed reception to something in my life.
Some were calling it peak fiction, others were saying it was pure garbage, and just about everything in between. As someone who, at the time, hadn't finished DMC3 yet, and the only other information I had on the series being the cutscenes from Devil May Cry 5 and 2 Death Battle episodes, I had to get to the bottom of this. So I promptly wrapped up my playthrough of Devil May Cry 3 and dug a little deeper. And after all of that, I came to a rather surprising conclusion, because while I do stand by my opinion that Netflix's Devil May Cry is a good show, a great show even, the same cannot be said for it being an adaptation.
And just as a disclaimer, I may have to delve into some minor spoilers in this video, nothing too in-depth, but to understand some of what I'm about to say, some context is going to be required. So, here's your mandatory spoiler warning.
Okay, let's get this setting out of the way. In the games, the setting is pretty vague, being somewhere in the United States. It never specifies where, but it's a bit of a gothic horror setting with abandoned ruins and a perpetually black, cloudy sky, at least in Devil May Cry 3. In the show, it's just blatantly New York. So, you know, nothing much has changed.
A lot of people seem to take issue with this, but I personally don't have a real problem with it. Like, yeah, sure, it doesn't exactly have the same vibes as the gothic setting in the games, and I do wish the show took place more at night to try and at least replicate it, but it's minor at the end of the day. Not bad, just different.
This is my last resort!
When it comes to the art style, I actually really do like it. It is Studio Mir, after all, even if their shows can be hit or miss a lot of the time. The animation art styles are always a highlight. 3D animation for some of the demons, however... Look, it's not bad 3D animation. It actually looks really good. The problem is that it clashes with the 2D environment, and is thus extremely noticeable, especially when it seems as though they could be animated in 2D, but just aren't.
And if they were going for an otherworldly vibe, like Bleach Thousand Year Blood War did for its CGI, they failed. Maybe if they made their setting darker in color, it might have succeeded.
I also have a few reservations about Lady's power armor. It's not bad, and I can definitely see that they were trying to explain away Lady's frankly superhuman feats from the games, but I do hope she gets a more game-accurate look in the future.
Come, my lady, come, my lady, you're my butterfly.
where things get a little complicated. So let's start with the easy one, Dante himself.
Dante is written excellently. Yeah, he's a wacky woohoo pizza man, as they say, but he's still taken seriously as a character. He's gone through quite a bit of trauma, and you can see how that's affected him. I do think it's weird how he doesn't know about his demonic heritage from the start this time around, but it's an acceptable change, not much to go into. And yes, it is weird that Johnny Young Bosch voices him when he voices Nero in the games, but I personally don't mind. He's already one of my favorite voice actors, and he slips into the role rather well. It's not a bad performance. It's just different. On the other hand, Lady is a character who I actually really like.
Okay, put your pitchforks away. Let me talk. No, she's not a perfect character, and I do hope the flaws in her writing are ironed out in Season 2. But she's not written that badly. Just because she swears a hell of a lot more than her game counterpart doesn't mean that she's that drastically different. Not to excuse the gratuitous swearing, though. I'm not a big fan of it. In fact, I'm fairly certain that she was responsible for 90% of the swearing in the show. For the love of all things holy, tone it down. Overall, though, Lady is a bit different from her game counterpart, but she isn't a bad character.
We have a lot of characters to get through, so let's do a speed run. Enzo! He's probably my favorite character outside of Dante and maybe Lady. Dude was just along for the ride and almost acted as an audience surrogate throughout some of the show. Very entertaining. There's nothing really to write home about when it comes to Lady's team. They're original characters who exist to die and give Lady some character development when they do. They're good for what they are, though.
Vice President Baines is aggressively Christian, or whatever Abrahamic religion he serves. In some ways, I kinda envy his devotion to God and how he constantly portrays it. But he's also a government psyop, so I don't trust him on principle. And considering how he acts in the last episode, I'm beginning to think he's never gone to church a day in his life. And I'm not exactly comfortable about Batman telling me about God's plan posthumously.
And that brings us nicely to our main villains, which are more of a mixed bag in my opinion. I don't really mind the main group under the White Rabbit. Sure, some hardcore fans are understandably upset that the showrunners just grabbed a few random bosses from the games and haphazardly placed them here, but they overall do their job at giving us some really cool action scenes. It's not bad that they're here, it's just different. The White Rabbit himself, on the other hand, look, while I enjoyed him throughout the first half of the show, the second half took him in a direction I just wasn't a fan of. Making him, and by extension his comrades, sympathetic only makes the decisions he makes seem rather hypocritical in hindsight, and I think that might have been the point, but it's not really explored that deeply. They make some rather confusing decisions sometimes, like, why did they rig this building to explode? Also, why did they take Enzo hostage? They already had plenty of hostages and are knowledgeable enough to know that Dante prioritizes innocent lives, so why did they either just kill Enzo on the spot or leave him? I'm thinking about this way harder than I should be.
But I suppose that brings us to their overall plot, so we can finally get into
The overall story is that the White Rabbit and his goofy gang want to tear down the wall that Sparta made between Earth and Hell so demons can start running rampant. It's up to Dante to stop them.
But I can't really go any further without context, so let's address the elephant in the room. Hell isn't real.
Or rather, it technically is real, but not in the way you'd think. It's alluded to in the first episode that hell exists in a parallel universe to Earth, where demons live and, on occasion, find their way into Earth and wreck stuff.
But it's revealed about halfway through the series that the so-called demons aren't really demons. They're their own species of people that humanity mistakes as demons because, yeah, remove the sad faces from the more humanoid ones, and you'd think they were demons too. And it's not called hell, it's instead called Makai. Apparently, it's a place where strength is everything, the air is toxic to those not strong enough, and for those lower on the food chain, Earth is the only refuge really safe for them.
This is what I was talking about earlier. If the villain's goal was to help these Makayan refugees, then why rig the entire building to explode? Seems rather hypocritical in hindsight.
And before anyone starts comparing the situation to something else, considering our modern-day political climate, I do think this was accidentally coincidental when taking into account just how long this show was in production for. Thankfully, it's not completely overt in that direction, and I do think some of the criticism towards it is very much overblown. The last few minutes of the final episode are the most on the nose it gets, but it's still not that bad. A few people saw the similarities, took it completely out of proportion, and everyone else jumped on the bandwagon.
But back on topic, it seems as though the show basically took the main premise of the Devil May Cry franchise, and while they may not have necessarily removed it, they completely flipped it on its head, really towing the line of the stupid humans were the real monsters all along plot that has usually always been dumb. They get so close to crossing that line, and they might have a smidge, but not enough in my eyes to really get mad about it.
Heck, from what I've seen, while that specific plotline might be a bit dumb, it's not that far off from an idea the games have. Multiple boss demons, at least in Devil May Cry 3, are Dante's enemy by happenstance and are perfectly willing to lend him their power after he proves himself. Demons having the capacity for good is an undersold element of the series, despite literally being in the name.
Maybe somewhere out there even a devil may cry when he loses a loved one.
So yes, while I do find the refugee plotline quite dumb on its own, it's nothing worth getting mad over. It's not bad, it's just different. And it was at this point that I realized that I had said some variation of "it's not bad, it's just different" about 5 times now, and I started to look back at everything I analyzed, and I suddenly came to a rather shocking conclusion.
Oh my god, they literally lost the plot.
Don't wanna be an American idiot.
There's only so many times when you can say some version of "it's not bad, just different" for a single piece of media, until you quickly realize that it adds up into the question, if it's so different, then is it even the same piece of media anymore? And that's the conclusion I got to.
A lot of the negative criticisms of this show have at least some merit, but I feel as though the ones that I saw completely overlooked why those criticisms are valid. And it's because this show literally lost the original series plot. This isn't Devil May Cry, it's an original show with a Devil May Cry layer on top of it.
The setting is completely different. There's a crap ton of original characters. Some of the characters that do exist in the source material can act differently, and the main premise of the source is almost completely overhauled. All of it eventually adds up. No wonder a lot of hardcore fans don't like this show, because it's barely Devil May Cry.
Episode 6 is the perfect example of this. Throughout all of this negative press, the one constant I found was that Episode 6 was fantastic. So I went into it expecting a good blend of some original stuff mixed in with a lot of Devil May Cry elements. What I got instead was a beautifully animated episode where only about a third of it could be related to DMC, consisting of Lady's backstory being paralleled with the other 2/3 of the episode, with the White Rabbit's backstory about his journey through Makai and how these two stories eventually intersect.
It's all great stuff, but at multiple points throughout the episode, I asked myself, what does this have to do with Devil May Cry? None of it is bad stuff, but it makes it seem as though they had no faith in their writing or marketing, so they slapped Devil May Cry on the front to get views.
To call back to the beginning of the video, this show exists in the same brain space in my head as the first Sonic movie. It has a lot of the same problems, different setting, original characters, existing characters acting different, etc., etc. The movie is less a Sonic movie and more a movie with Sonic in it, and even then, Sonic hardly acts like he does in the games. Because of that, though, I feel as though Devil May Cry has a leg up on that movie, because Dante actually seems pretty in line with his game counterpart.
And at the end of the day, I think that comparison was what gives me hope about the future of Netflix's Devil May Cry, because despite everything, Sonic was given a chance, and that chance ultimately led us to Sonic 3, the best video game adaptation so far, so maybe in time the creators of this show will take these criticisms to heart, and when Season 2 comes along, we'll get something truly special.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go watch the 2007 anime because apparently I'm hyperfixated now. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Till next time, guys. See ya.